How long did it take you to come to terms with what they were alleging you'd done? I mean...
Well, because the witch hunt had already begun, and I could see what was happening to other people, I was U-Tree 15. So some of the other cases were already in action. And I could see that there was a range of a minority of genuine offenders, and then some people where it was a reinterpretation of that pat on the backside at the 1979 Christmas party. And then there were some people who just said, who are these people? So I was in that latter category.
Sorry, was there ever a moment, I mean, were you sure, well, it is all going to go away, it has to, because you know how innocent you are, or were you terrified of, what if it doesn't? And that...
Well, we had a meeting 2 days after I was arrested with a reputational lawyer. Now, when I was a child, these things didn't exist, but they do now. And he said, are you afraid of the press? And I said, no, the press are, and I expect them to be, what I'm afraid of are bandwagoners. Because I had seen what had happened to some of the others, both genuinely and not so. The reason why they leak your name to the press is so they can hang you up like a piece of human flypaper, see who you attract, and the longer they don't get anybody, the longer they keep you up there.
What about, Paul, though, there would be people, particularly, say, during the Jimmy Savile case, that they said against that argument, well, if they weren't publicly named, other people wouldn't have come forward and perhaps, you know, we wouldn't have known about Jimmy Savile. So do you believe that there's any case for you being named?
I have heard that point, and I know that it is made by people of good faith. But what those people of good faith don't realize is that the police are not of good faith, and that they abuse this tactic. And they just, as Jim Davidson said in his book, he was told by one of his police officers they had been instructed to take any accusation completely seriously, no matter how flaky.
I understand all that. We're now in a situation where Cliff Richard has had the police tell the BBC that they're going to raid his house, make sure that the raid was on all the national media networks, and still Cliff Richard hasn't even been arrested. What would you say to Cliff?
Well, first of all, I'd say hello, because Cliff wants me to tell you he's watching right now.
Hello, Cliff.
Hello, Cliff.
He loves this program.
But what happened to you must be mentally had a dreadful impact on you, didn't it? Because I've known you for years.
Well, yes. Well,
thought...
of course, because subtly, black becomes white, true becomes false, and in my case especially, I came to this country when I was 21 years old. Nobody loves a country as much as someone who has chosen to live in it. I didn't have to live here. I came here because I felt it had the world's greatest university, which I attended. That was Oxford. I stayed to work on what I thought was the world's greatest radio networks, the BBC. The people of this country were kind and generous to me throughout. They gave me a quality health service when I needed it. They gave me a fine education and a career the likes of which could not be imagined until I lived it. How grateful I was to them. Imagine how disappointed I was when their country betrayed, persecuted, and abandoned me. The people of this country are a kind and gentle people. They deserve a higher quality police force.
And
just very quickly, because obviously you emanate from the States originally. Do you think if you would have lived in the States and the same scenario occurred, you'd have been treated in much the same way, or do you think they'd have handled it in a totally different way?
This scenario could not have occurred in the States because, and I realize this is an element of contention, and I'm not going to debate this at this moment, in the States there are statutes of limitations. And once a couple of decades have gone by, they believe that memory becomes faulty. And there is no witch hunt in the States. And every time I went to my city of birth, New York, while I was on bail, I breathed the air of freedom and sanity. And unfortunately, our beloved country, Great Britain, has been reduced to moral equivalence with Russia by the police and the CPS. The Cliff Richard case eats away at me every day, because here is one of the greatest Englishmen of the 20th century being persecuted in the 21st.
So what would you, having been through this yourself, and you said Cliff is watching as a friend, what would you say to him to get through it?
I say to him what I do say to him when we are in contact, and that is, be of good faith. He knows the love and support there is for him in this country, and he is determined to see this through. And I will make this promise to you. If Cliff Richard is ever convicted of any offence, down to and including parking violations, I will eat my hat.
OK. Paul Gambaccini, everybody.
It was a normal night that many of us can relate to. You'd put your daughter to bed, your husband was out, your other daughter was at a sleepover, ran a bath, and then the landing light flickered and there was a stranger in your landing.